This episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by Run Your Pool. March Madness is here, and Run Your Pool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. On today's episode, I tell you if Hudson Card will ultimately regret not transferring from the University of Texas. Colt McCoy says we should be patient with head coach Steve Sarkisian. I'll tell you my thoughts on that. And the Texas Longhorns football players were measured by speed in terms of miles per hour. I'll tell you who came in at the top. Longhorn Nation, welcome back.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Longhorns, your daily number one source for all things Texas athletics, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jonathan Davis, the voice of University of Texas football and basketball. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Longhorns your first listen of the day. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube for exclusive content and to put a face behind the voice of your favorite podcast. Make sure you like us, rate us, review us, give us 5 stars. Anything less than that, I have to believe you're not listening hard enough. Longhorn Nation, y'all know how we do it on this podcast. Let's get right into it. So, Hudson Card, started off as the starter last year for the Texas football team, ultimately was replaced by Casey Thompson, who has since transferred and became quarterback one, all signs point to, at the University of Nebraska. And a big reason that Casey Thompson ultimately transferred was not because the Texas Longhorns went 5-7 last year. It was not because they lost 6 straight games for the first time since the 1950s. It was because he saw the potential writing on the wall of a quarterback battle that he might not be favored in, as the golden boy with the mullet, Texas Longhorns quarterback Quinn Ewers came back to the 40 acres. He originally committed to UT out of high school, flipped and went to Ohio State, lost the starting quarterback battle with C.J. Stroud, and then came back to the University of Texas, and all signs point to him being the starting quarterback in the fall. He is the 5th best odds to win the Heisman, according to BetOnline, and he has not even been named the starter yet. So that tells you the talent he has and what most people around college football think will happen this year. So where does that leave Hudson Card, who started 2 games last year, played in multiple games? And where does that leave him? You know, I respect the pride that he has, and I respect him being a little ambitious and saying, you know, I'm going to stay at the 40 acres. I'm going to compete for a job that he probably has the leg up on right now, just because he's been in the system. He's familiar with the playbook, and Quinn Ewers is coming in as a newer quarterback, having not played meaningful football in over 2 years. But you also have to question, was it the right move to stay and compete with Quinn Ewers for the starting job, who ultimately I think, and most people think, will end up the starting quarterback by September for our first game against Louisiana Monroe. And so if Hudson Card would have pulled the Casey Thompson route, he would have had more options, been able to transfer earlier, likely somewhere in the spring, for a team that was looking for a starting quarterback. You know, Hudson Card, this is somebody who was a blue chip prospect. This is somebody who was a 4-star quarterback, has a lot of talent, and could go into a program and compete and win for a starting job. So you have to wonder if he limited his options, because, you know, by the time that the starting quarterback is named for the Texas Longhorns, you can enter the transfer portal at that time, but most programs will already have moved on with who their starter is going to be for this season. So you're likely looking at a season of being a backup, whether it's here on the Texas Longhorns football team or somewhere else. I just doubt that as more time passes, you'll be able to come in somewhere, you know, during the summer, especially after the spring or during the fall, and be able to pick up as somebody's starting quarterback. And so you have to wonder if him deciding to stay and compete with Quinn Ewers will ultimately backfire for Hudson Card, and he loses out, you know, on a year of him potentially playing somewhere else. Now, I know that his goal and, you know, his dream was to continue to play at the University of Texas, but, you know, it's a tough business. It's college football, and especially with the transfer portal now, with Quinn Ewers coming back, the best players are going to be on the field. And especially in a year where, Texas fans were calling for Steven Sarkisian to be bought out and be fired last year after one season. As dark as some of the times were with Tom Herman and coaches before that, we never lost 6 straight games, especially 6 straight games in conference play. So it wasn't great last year, and I think that Hudson Card will ultimately regret not transferring out of the University of Texas. I think Quinn Ewers is going to get the job, and then when you look at a quarterback behind him like Malik Murphy, who's 6'5", has a cannon for an arm, has all the arm talent in the world. He's a legitimate, candidate to compete for the starting job this year. I know it'll likely come down to Quinn Ewers and Hudson Card, but Malik Murphy is super talented. He looks like potentially one of your quarterbacks of the future, maybe could be the quarterback of the future after Quinn Ewers. We know that Texas has their eyes set on 2023 number 1 overall quarterback and prospect in Arch Manning. So the future doesn't look bright if he doesn't win the starting job this spring, which I don't think he will, with Hudson Card. And then, after that, you have 2024, 2025. They're going to be constantly looking for quarterbacks to come in here. Whoever the head coach is, hopefully it's still Sark. If it's still Sark, that means that he's had a great deal of success in that time in the program. But it's just going to get tougher and tougher each year. And the older you get, they only continue to bring in these younger, more talented, more versatile, more athletic quarterbacks into college football. And so I think that Hudson Card's best chance of being a starter this year was to transfer somewhere else, and his best chance of playing over the next few years was to transfer to another university and ultimately compete for a starting job that way, because it seems that the writing on the wall for this Texas Longhorns football team is that Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter, and I think he should be. Once again, when you have a coach in Steven Sarkisian who is on the hot seat, you have to put the best players out there on the field, and I think Quinn Ewers is the best player in that quarterback room right now. I know that people have concerns about the fact that he hasn't played football in 2 years, and some people have cited, maybe he's more about himself than the team. But I think you've seen, the University of Texas athletics page posted him when they were trying to support the women's basketball team, get more people in the stands. You've seen the players kind of rally around him. I know that Bijan, Xavier Worthy, and Quinn Ewers did a signing. If they haven't done it already, they're doing a signing in Grapevine, Texas. People have started to call them the triplets, a la the Cowboys in the 90s with Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, and Troy Aikman. And so I think that this team is rallying around Quinn Ewers. I think that people know that Quinn Ewers is going to be the starter. And, Hudson Card, like I said, he may have missed his mark to transfer and be a starting quarterback somewhere else this year. And then you have to look at it how teams will look at him losing the starting job will affect him. Now, there's so many programs that he'll ultimately be able to land somewhere and compete for a starting job. And maybe, eventually we'll get one more year to prove himself as a starter. But at maybe a lower tier program or something like that. But you also, have to understand that teams will hold the fact that he could not beat out. Even as talented as Quinn Ewers is, people will hold that against him, that he could not beat out Quinn Ewers in camp. And so I just think this sets him back, definitely this year, but maybe for a few years. The fact that he decided to stay and compete with Quinn Ewers for the starting job. Once again, I respect it. The pride, the moxie, the ambition, the competitiveness to say, I can come in here and win this job. But ultimately, if you lose it, what was the risk and reward on that decision when you have to transfer out anyway? And you could have transferred out in the spring and competed for a starting job somewhere else. Coming up next, Colt McCoy says we should be patient with Steve Sarkisian. And I agree. Coming up next. Man, do I love March Madness. And I love those brackets, but I can't remember the last time I actually went deep or even won any money. I'm hedging my bets this year with StatHero's NCAA Pick'em contest. StatHero's NCAA single game Pick'ems pits the star players against each other in an amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Take control back from those handicappers that always seem to have the advantage. Start focusing on the players you know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. Stat Hero gives you the advantage, resulting in their gamers winning 4 times more often. Why? Because StatHero eliminates the mystery about who or what you are going up against. In addition to their pickup games, they also have dozens of lineups you can comb through to take on head to head. They simply post set of players for you to take on with a set of players you choose. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked on and use promo code locked on for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/locked on. Use promo code locked on for a 100% match. stathero.com/locked on. Promo code locked on. Terms and conditions apply. So y'all sure y'all go check out Stat Hero and get your gambling on. Everybody but anybody that's involved with a professional team. We saw the Calvin Ridley news, which is sad. Suspended for a year for gambling on games. However, that's the rule, and he made the decision to bet in his own name. And so he made that bet. He's going to have to land it. But everybody else, if you're not affiliated to any professional teams, make sure y'all go to Stat Hero and get your little gambling on. So Colt McCoy did an interview recently and says that we should be patient with head coach Steven Sarkisian. And, Sark, I love Sark. And he has a great offensive pedigree. He's shown what he's been able to do at Washington, USC at times, and then kind of resurrected his coaching career at Alabama, winning a national championship there and developing some really great players on offense, quarterbacks like Mac Jones and Bryce Young a little bit. And then, of course, players like Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith. And some of the great receivers, Najee Harris at running back, some of the great receivers and talents they had there on the offensive end. But this is a coach that, Texas Longhorns fans were very disappointed in last year, rightfully so, and we're calling for him to be fired with over a $20 million buyout, losing 6 straight games, going 5-7 last year. And so Colt McCoy, who was part of really the last golden era of University of Texas football, the last time that, we could rightfully say that UT was back, says that we should be patient with Steven Sarkisian and give him time. It's a new coach. It's a new recruiting class. And these things take time. And, in college football, we don't want to hear that, especially as Texas Longhorns fans. From 2001 to 2009, they won 10 games every year. They have only won 10 games since then, right? So, once again, 10 games every year from 2001 to 2009, have only had one 10-win season since then. So, these fans, Longhorn Nation, were itching for a winning season. We're itching for a blue blood program to return to its rightful spot at the top of the college football rankings, compete for a Big 12 championship again, compete for a college football playoff spot again. And so you have to look at it on one side. And I do agree with Colt McCoy that we do need to be patient with Steve Sarkisian. You can look at last season, and I've said this is a team that should have won 8 or 9 games. Now, you can blame that on Steven Sarkisian, the way that this team collapsed. You could say that a team as talented as they were, although they had some faults on the offensive and defensive lines, underachieved last year, going 5-7, losing to Kansas at home, who had not won a road Big 12 game since 2008, and were 30.5-point underdogs against the Texas Longhorns, losing that team. So definitely you can look at it and say things could have been a lot better. They lost, I think it was 4 or 5 games by 8 points or less. So most of their losses were one possession. But at the end of the day, they still were losses, right? And they count the same whether you lose by 30 or you lose by 1 point. And so you can look at it and say that, what happened last year was unacceptable. Or you can look at it and say they lost a lot of close games with the improved talent, Sark's second year, all that talent they have on offense, Gary Patterson coming over to help the defense. They'll be a lot better this year on that side of the ball. So I think that we do need to be patient with Sark, at least this year. Now, if they come out, I think this team at least needs to win 8-9 games, and really even 8. If they go 8-4, it depends on what they do in the bowl game. But even 8, I'm kind of going to be disappointed. I just, and once again, I could be a fan. I could be a Longhorn fan, but just seeing all the talent on the offensive side, on the defensive side, the coaches that he's brought in, just kind of the aura around this program right now, I can't see a path to them losing 4 games next year. Now, that Alabama is going to be a tough game on the schedule. Red River rivalry with Oklahoma is always going to be tough. And then you have Baylor and Oklahoma State and maybe some other schools in the Big 12 that could sneak up on you. But even then, those are really only the four teams I could see even challenging Texas next year. And if Sark goes out there and loses all four games to them, you're talking about a Jim Harbaugh situation at Michigan where it doesn't matter if you're beating Purdue and Nebraska and all of these schools if you can't beat Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State. And so I just can't see a path to where Texas doesn't at least win 9 games next year and look very competitive and look vastly different from the team that was on the field last year. So I'm riding with Sark. I'm riding with Colt McCoy, saying that Sark we should be patient with Steven Sarkisian this year. And, I'm going to give him another season. Once again, I think with Quinn Ewers at center, the transfers that he's brought in, the number 5 recruiting class, just the playmakers that they have, I don't see a path to this team not being successful next year. And I don't see a path to this team not being one of the best teams in the Big 12 and ultimately probably, a sneaky candidate to be one of the best teams in the country. I think Sark is really building something special here. Just with his recruitment, his transfers, you could tell that these commits and these players have a lot of respect for Sark and this coaching staff. I thought, one of the most underrated and shrewd moves of the offseason was bringing in Gary Patterson, a head coach that had a lot of success at TCU, and making him a special assistant to the head coach and helping Pete Kwiatkowski with a defense that was ranked 100th in the country last year. They're going to be much improved. They're still in the market for some great transfers. O'Shawn Mathis was in Austin on Sunday and said he had an unforgettable visit. So signs are pointing to him transferring and then giving you another really talented piece on your defensive line that can get to the quarterback and also stop the run. They're also in the transfer market for a couple of linebackers from West Virginia and D. Ricky Wright out of Vanderbilt. So this defense is going to continue to improve. They brought over Ryan Watts, the cornerback transfer from Ohio State, plus got some really good DBs like Terrence Brooks, Brian Allen Jr., and Jalen Gilbo in this recruiting class. So I think this team will be much improved. And I think after this year, Sark will no longer be on the hot seat. It will no longer need to be patient with Steven Sarkisian because he will be the head coach of the future for the Texas Longhorns. We're riding with Steven Sarkisian here at Locked On Longhorns. And hopefully after this season, anybody that's doubting Sark and his Texas Longhorns football team will be riding with them as well. Coming up next, we tell you who some of the fastest players on this Texas Longhorns football team are, once again, as measured by miles per hour, top speed. March Madness is right around the corner. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual or are you looking for the best? We've done our homework here and we're running brackets with RunYourPool.com. Along with standard brackets, RunYourPool offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you won't find at ESPN or CBS. If you've got a business, RunYourPool can help you take some of that madness magic and play alongside your employees or even gain customers. Plus, they offer full white glove customer support, custom branding, and one of the easiest 3-minute setups you'll ever find. Clearly, we believe in Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. So, Longhorn Nation, the Texas football players were measured in winter workouts at top speed by miles per hour. And I'm going to tell you who came in as the fastest players on the football team, as well as one player who hasn't enrolled yet, who will likely be on that list the next time they measure it. So, coming in at number one, I don't think this will be a surprise to many, if at all, Texas Longhorns fans. Xavier Worthy came in as the fastest player on this football team. And we saw that last year with 3 catches of over 60 yards. We saw him take the opening score to the house in the rival rivalry against Oklahoma. The screen pass, just breaking one tackle. And then after that, beating everybody by 15 to 20 yards down the field. It wasn't even a foot race, right? It was no question once he got about 20 yards down the field that he was going to score. So no doubt that he's the fastest player on the football team. And then you look at players like Keelan Robinson, running back for the University of Texas. He came in as one of the fastest players on this football team. Number 2 actually was Jordan Whittington. This was kind of a surprise to me. At top speed, he came in as the second fastest player on this Texas Longhorns football team. So, once again, if he can stay healthy, they are going to cause nightmares for opposing defenses this year. If you have 2 of the fastest players at top speed on the Texas Longhorns football team in your receiving core, with a quarterback like Quinn Ewers just being able to play point guard and distribute the ball to both of them, get them the ball in deep routes, middle routes, or just behind the line of scrimmage and allow that speed and playmaking to take over, look out. You also had running back Jaden Blue, so the freshman running back coming out of Houston, who, likely probably won't get much playing time this year. He is an early enrollee, but he's got 3 great backs ahead of him, and Keelan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, and, of course, Bijan, the Heisman hopeful this year. But look for him eventually to compete and probably be one of the starting running backs at the University of Texas, or part of a 2 to 3-headed monster, along with maybe Ruben Owens, the number 1 running back in the country in the 2023 class, who likely will commit to the University of Texas. He has a couple of visits coming up during spring practices. He's going to visit on back-to-back weekends. So I said on the podcast yesterday, the 24/7 Sports crystal ball gives him a 92% chance of coming to Texas. So all signs point to him doing that. Him and Jaden Blue could be your running backs of the future at the University of Texas. And then Deshaun Jameson, he came in as one of the fastest players on the team. We've seen his punt return and kick return ability, and his also speed is a great factor to have at defensive back, really anywhere on the football field, maybe outside of punter and kicker. So, that's a great asset for him. It's a great asset to have one of the fastest players on the team at that position, and it's why he's so good at returning kicks and punts. So one player who wasn't on this list because he hasn't enrolled yet is Brennan Thompson, the 4-star receiver. We haven't talked to him a lot about him on the podcast, just because when you have receivers like Isaiah Nair, Jordan Whittington, Troy O'Meary, and Xavier Worthy, I mean, that's enough to talk about right there. And then the tight ends of Jatavian Sanders and Jaleel Billingsley. Well, Brennan Thompson is a track star with track speed. We just saw a few days ago he ran a 10-2-2 in the 100-yard dash. Once again, that is a 10-2-2 in the 100-yard dash. To put that in perspective, that's fast, super fast. To put that in perspective, Xavier Worthy, who is the fastest player on this football team right now, ran a 10.55 in high school, which is fast. Brennan Thompson ran a 10.22. And so I think he comes in right away, especially with that type of speed. And Sark can utilize him in the slot. He's got a smaller stature. He's about 5'9", 5'10", 160, 50, 60 pounds. But utilize him in the slot and just get the ball to him. And similar to ways we saw with Jalen Waddle at Alabama, just behind the line of scrimmage, throw him and ways that he use Xavier Worthy, right? Just throw him the ball behind the line of scrimmage, those really short routes. Just get the ball in his hands, jet sweeps, motions, find ways to get the ball in his hands and just let that playmaking and speed take over. So Xavier Worthy is listed as the fastest player on this football team right now. When Brennan Thompson enrolls, he likely takes that mantle. And when you have, I mentioned the 4 receivers they have, plus the 2 tight ends, plus the 3 running backs already on this podcast. When you add a player with the speed of Brennan Thompson like that, who can just blow the doors off, and you have to account for that, plus Xavier Worthy, plus Troy O'Meary, plus Jordan Whittington, Isaiah Nair, Jaleel Billingsley, Jatavian Sanders, Bijan Robinson, Keelan Robinson, Roshan Johnson, Quinn Ewers, an improved offensive line with 5-star offensive linemen coming in, and Kelvin Banks and Devin Campbell. This is why I'm willing to give Sark the patience that Colt McCoy asked for, because I know that he is building something special at the University of Texas. And you look, I know football games aren't won on paper, but you look at all those names I just mentioned and tell me that this University of Texas football team will not be much improved in 2022. I don't see a path to that being possible. This will be one of the best teams in the Big 12 next year, one of the most talented teams in the country, and has the potential to be one of the best teams in the country when all is said and done. Thank you, Longhorn Nation, for tapping in to Locked On Longhorns and making us your first listen of the day once again. Peace.